This edition of Race Weekend focuses on how AAP Motorsport dealt with the difficulties of continuing to promote motorsports under COVID-19 pandemic conditions. The COVID-19 pandemic hit local motorsports hard. The local motorsport season was cut short even before it got really started. The first rounds of local grassroots series, like the Philippine Autocross Championship Series and the National Slalom Series, managed to flag off, but then COVID-19 happened. The rest of the entire season red flagged. As COVID-19 cases increased, government, through the Interagency Task Force, imposed community quarantine restrictions, which locked down communities and curtailed all forms of activities, including motorsports.
Among the guidelines that they released was that no sports were allowed because of, obviously, of the risk of infection. So obviously we are required to comply. No? So we issued a memorandum to all our motorsport organizers to inform them that in view of the pandemic and the IATF guidelines, motorsport events would have to temporarily stop.
What started out as week-long lockdowns turned into months and into a year. During the lockdowns, it was a situation the Automobile Association Philippines, or AAP, certainly could not have foreseen and planned for.
The category would go from ECQ to GCQ, back to ECQ, MECQ. You know, we're all familiar with this, right? And none of it really began to look very promising for us until the beginning of this year. So for us, 2020 was a dead year.
During the lockdowns, AAP focused attention on e-motorsports, something that FIA and by extension as a local affiliate in the Philippines were also looking to develop as part of overall efforts to engage more people to participate in or be a fan of motorsports.
The pandemic gave an extra push because actually people couldn't leave their houses, right? So the FIA wanted people to remain interested in motorsports, e-motorsports, because people can enjoy this from their homes, without leaving their homes. And at the same time, there were other people locally who were organizing e-motorsports. For instance, JP Tuason has his own PRS motorsport games, but that was basically a circuit e-motorsport. So what we decided to do was to try to make a rally e-motorsport, because there are people who like both circuit and rally. So Ivan, our motorsport manager, Ivan Isada, put up and created our own e-motorsport games, and from the very outset attracted quite a number of people.
But even without the opportunity to hold motorsports events, especially to continue the gains in spreading the gospel of motorsports, through the Motorsports Development Program, the AAP continued to engage with motorsports clubs and organizers during the pandemic.
The MSDP program is vital to us, because what we want to do is to keep trying to develop grassroots racing. During the worst parts of the pandemic, 2020, Vip Isada, who is basically the person supervising MSDP, has been going around the provinces and coordinating with motorsports clubs, primarily in Cebu, Cagayan de Oro, Bacolod, etc. And he's continuing to spread the gospel without actually conducting motorsport events because we cannot. But, he's been coordinating with them. And so now that it looks like the pandemic is on its way out, although slowly, I think that he's working now on this program for 2021-2022.
With the IATF beginning to ease quarantine restrictions, what is AAP doing to help resume physical motorsports activities?
Last month, we issued a directive to the organizers saying, you may now conduct motorsport events in GCQ and MGCQ areas, subject to your compliance with the IATF health protocol. So at the end of a long, long tunnel, there is now some light. Our organizers are beginning to schedule their calendars. We had a karting event in Carmona. We have an enduro event in Clark, and both events are sanctioned by AAP and are subject to observation by AAP observers present at the events to make sure that all the guidelines are met.
Can people expect more motorsports activities beginning to resume in the second half of the year?
Well, between now and the end of the year, you will start to see progressively more and more motorsport events. No, as I said, karting, we already have a calendar for that between now and the end of the year. I'm pretty sure that the circuit event organizers will developing their schedule, starting of course with the enduro. You're going to see progressively more events. My suggestion is we have a website. The website contains all the calendars, all the motorsport events that are going to take place. And so I suggest that if they want to know what's happening, they go to aap.org.ph, go to the motorsports section, and that's the best way for them to keep track of what's happening in motorsports.
Will the consumption of local grassroots and higher forms of racing mean that AAP will no longer be pushing e-motorsports programs?
Now this e-motorsport is part and parcel of our motorsport events. We consider this a motorsport event even if it's virtual, no? Because it's the wave of the future. It gives everybody a chance to participate in motorsports without actually having to spend the money, get a car and run it, you know? And then they're on the same footing as sila Hamilton, sila Verstappen, because they can compete against these guys virtually, no? For our own, domestically speaking, we've put up e-rallies, and there are other people who have organized their own, like JT, as I said. And we're going to continue to try to develop this so that we can create a following for this, no? Because I really think that this is the way to get more people involved in motorsports.
Motorsport is now back on track, literally and figuratively. Now, it's the responsibility of race organizers to comply with all mandated health protocols to ensure both of them and their staff and racing teams, drivers and mechanics, and others are protected.